Welcome to the You World Order Showcase podcast, where we feature life, health, and transformational coaches being the change they seek in the world. If you'd like to be featured on our podcast to share what you're contributing to making the world a better place for us all, please go to www.jointheyouworldorder.com. Be sure to like and follow our podcast for the latest episodes. Hi, and welcome to the You World Order Showcase podcast. I'm your host, Jill Hart, and with us today is Philippa Bagley.
Yep, said it right.
Okay. I'm notorious for mangling people's names, so I always ask with a question mark. Philippa helps business owners, executives, and high-stress professionals reduce stress, build emotional resilience, and resolve underlying issues in just 3 months. She does this by integrating neuroscience, psychotherapy, and coaching without creating long-term dependency on therapy or coaching, even if they're struggling with imposter syndrome, insecurities, or unresolved anxieties. And she's the host of Journey to Purpose podcast. Welcome to the show, Philippa. It's really great to have you here.
Thank you, Jill. And also on the name front, everyone says it wrong for some reason, so do not worry at all.
Okay.
but it's wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me.
So tell us your story. How did you get started in all of this? I know that you were in the military at one point.
Yeah. It didn't start after the military. So I served in the British Army and then went on to be a reservist. And I worked in corporations for a long time. Where it really started for me was with my husband. He had a mental health crisis, and at that point, I knew mental health first aid, but it wasn't enough. And what we also found exploring was that, like, the lots of talking therapies, so traditional psychology, it didn't move him. It got him in this loop, and so we had to look for something different. And I discovered that I really, really found this stuff fascinating. I mean, I love to learn. And so it's just another avenue of learning. But with that, and then the pandemic hitting, and with my army background, I was reaching that age, so I'm in my 40s, where a lot of my colleagues who have also served, they're starting to come out with PTSD, they're starting to come out with anxiety, with all these things that you think, how is that possible? And so it really was the combination of my husband and then my colleagues having these life challenges. Made me go, there must be a better way. There must be something I can do about this. And so I ended up studying and applying, and then here we are today.
That's really fascinating. And it seems like a lot of people in 2020, it was kind of a turning point for all of us and it doesn't really matter even where you are in the world. I mean, this is a global phenomenon where people just seem to be waking up and realizing that they were living a life that really didn't feel good to them. They were trying to do things, be the good girl and boy, and do what was expected of them, but it just wasn't working anymore. I think the global slowdown was like, wow, this is different, and this is kind of like a moment. I have a moment to look at what my life is like.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think you can, from the research I was doing and from what I was seeing, you could put it into different categories. So you had, like, people myself, I was still working in what I was doing. I was doing a government contract. So my life didn't really change, other than actually I stopped traveling so much, and that was wonderful because I actually live in a forest. So we could walk out in the UK. We're allowed to go. You could walk out from your house living in the forest. I could walk and walk and walk and walk. So for me, it was a very positive experience, and it made me reflect on the life that I want to live. You had people like my brother. He suffers from, I say suffers is one word. He has Asperger's. He's very intelligent. Lived on his own, and although he struggles with people interaction because he can't always read their emotions, he's not a hermit. And of course, suddenly he was shut down into this world where he couldn't go anywhere. He lived in London in a flat. He really struggled with that because he couldn't interact with people. And you have everyone on the spectrum in between the two. But I think the key thing that you said there was the slowdown, because everybody, regardless, had more time. Not nearly everybody. I think about the Amazon drivers might not have more time, but nearly everybody had more time to stop and reflect and go, is there another way of being? Am I truly happy? And that's a real gift that we're not often afforded. And that was like a once in a generational, everybody could get that moment. And people, some went forward and some went to really dark places.
Mhm. Yeah. And it didn't, for some of us, it was like an aha moment and a reason to really embrace who we are and step out and if you're the kind of person that's into helping people, it was like, oh, I know that there's a need and
Yeah.
I'm gonna go pursue it, which I think is what you did. You saw these people that were struggling and you said, hey, that's interesting to me. Let me figure out how to solve that problem for you.
Absolutely, but it also made a really good lesson even back then that I didn't know until I was later on my journey, which is not everyone wants to be helped.
Yes.
And that's a really crucial thing. I'm sitting there trying to, I see colleagues struggling and I'm reaching out going, hey, are you okay? And for some people, even having someone notice that they're not okay is a real red flag. And I got a lot of fear responses from some people who either because of my age, my gender, or the type of relationship we had, um, didn't think it was appropriate for me to ask them if they're okay. And it's that old thing of the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Mhm.
And what I've learned since is it's so important to have people's buy-in and their acceptance that something isn't okay before you spring it on them going, hey, I think you're not okay. They don't always want to hear it or they're not ready to hear it.
They don't recognize it in themselves.
Exactly.
Even though we had that gift, they they didn't they didn't slow down enough, or they did slow down and they it's like the deer in the headlights. Oh
Mm,
crap, this is really bad. I'm not going to look at that. I'll find
yeah.
something else to do, watch the television, whatever. But or drink too much. I mean, there was the, drink wine. Well, that's not a solution to the problem. It's just going to make it worse in the
Yeah.
long run. So I can totally relate to they have to buy in. It was a lesson I didn't learn until much later in life, and I struggled with that for a lot of years because people would think I was bossy. My superpower is problem solving.
Yeah. So you want to solve problems.
I You tell me you've got a problem, or if I can see you've got a problem, I want to solve it. It's like big puzzle. Let's throw it out on the table, get those pieces going.
I mean, it's so natural as well, people who want to serve, as you say, whether you're a problem solver or just like a caregiver and whatever format that takes.
Yeah.
We see someone not in their best place. We see a problem that we think we can solve.
Uh-huh.
But that lesson of knowing that people have to be ready and open to be helped. You can
Yeah.
throw everything you have at them and they won't hear you because they're not ready.
I've learned to discern better when I talk to people, and I'm sure you have too. And I just
Mm.
come out and ask them, "Hey, do you want this problem solved, or you just want to complain about it?" Because, sometimes we just want to complain about something.
So I have a thing with my dad and my husband. Actually, my brother a little bit as well. If they complain about something once, like something medical, they can have it. If it's more than once, my question is, have you gone to a doctor or the pharmacy or wherever? And if they haven't, then I don't give them any sympathy until they go and deal with the problem. And it's been a very effective way of getting my close family to address these problems because they know I'm not going to give them sympathy. But it's so true though. Sometimes you do just need to vent, and that is also very important. But there comes a point where, and again, you'll know this. Some people like to sit in their pain. They like to sit in their misery. It's a badge of honor, and it doesn't actually serve them, but they won't let it go.
Or
They'll just
anyone around them.
absolutely, yeah,
And I'm here to tell you, you have permission to not allow those people to occupy space in your head
yeah,
or your heart. And that's where boundaries come in.
absolutely, and that's why boundaries are so important as well. I
Mhm.
mean, I love my family, and actually, it's worked. Turns out my dad and my brother and my husband are very trainable, and they now know after one strike they have to go and solve the problem or be quiet about it. But I have also consciously over the last 4 or 5 years moved away from people who are have been too negative. It's the radiator versus the drain. It's not that I don't care, because I do care, but I care about myself enough to go, I'm sorry, but you don't want any help. You don't want to listen. You don't want to change. I can't keep giving you my energy and my time just for you to suck it
Even if they're
out.
not, yeah, even if they're
Yeah,
not with you, it's like it
absolutely.
it goes on in your head, and they really do just suck your energy, and they don't even, I don't think that it's malicious. They don't
Oh
mean
no,
to,
never.
but it's just the kind of people that we are. It happens.
Yeah,
So we have to, for our own protection, remove ourselves from those sorts of people and those sorts of situations for our own mental health.
definitely. And it's the old thing of put your oxygen mask on first.
Yeah.
We really, and that doesn't it matter what job you're in, actually, whether you're a caregiver or a therapist, a coach, whatever, whoever you are, put on your oxygen mask first. Because if you cannot look after yourself, of course you can't look after other people. But
Mhm.
in that, just be aware of the people who are never going to want to do anything, or sometimes by pushing them away, it's the kick they need to change. Not always, but sometimes it does have an effect. But the crucial thing is saving your own energy, your own boundaries, to make sure that you are good for you, because then you can go out and serve other people better.
Mhm. Yeah. And the people that want and need your help,
Mm,
you allow space for those people to come into your circle, because we can only deal with so many people at a time. We can't help everybody. And when you're selective about who you're working with, then it allows the people that really do need your help and want your help, most
yeah.
importantly, to come into your circle. So you use a different types of modalities, and you integrate neuroscience. I'm really curious about that. How does that look?
Oh, do you know what I've got? I'm just thinking, behind me I have a prop. I didn't plan this, but I just saw it. I was like, oh, I've got my brain in the room. Um, so
That's it.
science letter. This is what I do for fun and for my work. Um, so the thing about neuroscience, the thing that I love about it, and more so than psychology, it's a way of rewriting your behaviors at a really deep level. And the reason I got my brain is basically every time we have any kind of stimulus, so even just like waking up, seeing the sun, what happens is it's part of your brain called the thalamus in the middle of somewhere here. And the stimulus goes right to the thalamus. And from there, it goes up to your intelligent brain up here and down to your emotional brain. This is the same for everybody. What also happens for everybody is you actually have an emotional response first to everything. Normally, your intelligent brain kicks in like half a second later and goes, hey, it's cool, or it's just the sun, or it's whatever it is. And we're all good. We just carry on with our lives. But what often happens with a lot of people is they're stuck down in their emotional brain. And there's a thing that called the amygdala, which I'm sure you'll know about, but the amygdala is the fear center, fight or flight, or in actually fight, flight, fawn or freeze, you might hear as well. And so many people get stuck down here and don't realize it. So the reason, I know everyone listening, people just listening can't see it, but trust me, there's a brain and it's down the bottom of your brain. Um,
And she's pointing
people,
to the important parts.
I am. Here's one I made earlier. And so with people going through imposter syndrome, with anxiety, with even depression, what's happening is you're stuck in this emotional part of your brain down the bottom of your brain in the amygdala area. And the more you do it, the more it becomes your template for behavior. So there's another part of your brain called the hippocampus, which is kind of next to the amygdala. And basically that goes, oh, today at work, someone was grumpy. It must be my fault. And that you take everything to be your fault. And that becomes a template for your reactions to everything. And so what happens more and more and more, you start to get stuck down here and only see the negative. And the brain loves to be negative. It's its way of protecting you. But of course, in this modern day and age, it doesn't serve you. And so the reason I love neuroscience is because we can just rewire all of that and move you out of the emotional brain back up into the intelligent brain. And it's not painful. It doesn't take a long time. It's literally just about rewiring your brain with a concept called neuroplasticity, which is basically the idea that we are not fixed, we can change. And previously in old sort of psychological theories, we thought that everyone was fixed. So after usually around you get over being a teenager, you were what you were. You couldn't become anything different. You couldn't grow. You couldn't evolve. Like your brain was fixed. But we now know that you can change at any point in your life. And this is so exciting for me because it means, who do you want to be? Because you can become that person. But it all starts with getting yourself out of the emotional brain and back into the intelligent brain so you can make these conscious decisions. And using neuroscience concepts, talking about rewiring the brain, neuroplasticity, along with clinical hypnotherapy, psychotherapy, coaching, it's such, in my opinion, a powerful shortcut. You don't, and also I work in solutions focused therapy. So sometimes you need to go back to go forward, but you don't always. And again, with the use of neuroscience, we can either essentially do like rewire memories of trauma, of overwhelm or fear quite quickly, and then allow you to move forward to be that person who's not carrying those things. And so I get so excited about it. As you can tell, it's just really powerful, but also painless. And that's the crucial thing, isn't it, for everybody? You want to move forward quickly.
And it doesn't require drugs.
No drugs.
No
No
drugs.
drugs.
The,
Yeah.
the thing about your emotional brain, whenever you get a stimulus, it's going to generate some chemical response. Your emotions are a chemical response
Uh-huh.
in your body. So it's not just your thoughts, it's your whole physical well-being that you're affecting when you make these changes. And they can happen really fast
Oh yeah.
with some of these modalities that are out there if you have the right coach to help you understand how to make it happen for you. And when you talk about 3 months, 3 months is actually even a really long time. In three
Oh,
months,
it
you're going to have this so cemented into you that you will be a different person at the end of 3 months.
absolutely. And I mean, I work a lot with trauma victims as well because of my background. And I've had people, like even I've questioned myself going, and then suddenly around a month and a half, the shift happens. It's amazing. And but there are people who don't need 3 months, in all honesty. I had a lady come in to see with me. She had an extreme phobia of heights and open spaces. Now this was a problem because she loved running and was married to a Marine and they loved running up and down hills and she couldn't go up a hill. It was that bad.
Mhm,
What was interesting though, she'd previously tried to address it under hypnotherapy and had a
mhm,
panic attack under hypnotherapy because unfortunately the practitioner wasn't perhaps as experienced as they should have been.
mhm.
Um, and with her, I could have done it in 1 or 2 sessions, in all honesty, but because of that panic attack, I didn't want to trigger things. And I think I took 4 sessions to really completely rewire everything. And
Mhm.
what was lovely, she went away to Italy with her husband to run up and down some mountains. And at one point, her husband turned around and went, "How are you okay?" Because she hadn't noticed that she was on a mountain. And 4 sessions, that was it. And people people think that transformation has to be long and drawn out. And I would completely agree that transformation comes from little tiny shifts. But those little tiny shifts can accumulate so quickly to a very fast transformation.
Yeah, it's doing some simple things that you think are silly. I mean, when I first heard about EFT and hypnotherapy, but mostly EFT, I thought it was the silliest thing I could ever imagine. But I did it anyway. And, just tapping on points on your face. But it works. I
Oh,
don't know why it works, but there's lots of science, there's lots of evidence about it. I have
100%.
personal stories about it, and it just like
I mean, I was the biggest skeptic of all this stuff, in all honesty, because I came from um just being in the army. You had to get on with it. You're very practical, and I served in Afghanistan, so you don't really have time for all this emotional stuff, and it sounds a bit woo. Um, but exactly that. I mean, when I did my clinical hypnotherapy training, I don't even know why I signed up because I was like, I don't really think this works, but I'll do it anyway. And then I understood the science and I saw it working. I was like, oh, and it's the same with a lot of like EFT, with EDMR. They've got like ERDM. I always get this one run away,
I
but
don't know what those are. I know what you're talking about, but I don't know what the
the
letters are.
rapid eye movement thingy. I
Yeah.
can never get the letters right. All of these have really good foundations in science, but I tell you why I love neuroscience is because that's the science that explains why all these things work. It's not psychology, it's necessarily, it's often in the neuroscience, and we didn't understand it for very long. But now we do, and I freaking love it.
I do too. It helps people have better lives. And when
Yeah,
people have better lives, they're happier and it makes the world better. They're not
absolutely.
all about sitting in their unhappiness and making other people miserable and plotting ways to kill each other. Yeah.
Perhaps we need more people happy, let's be honest. Let's do
Yeah,
more of that.
yeah, for sure. So, how do you help people? I mean, in terms of, is it groups, is it individuals, and how would they like come to see you?
So mostly I do one-on-one work. I do have a group that I've just started, which is a kind of an online journey where I drop in once a week to do some mentoring. But mostly it's one-to-one. And going back to what you said at the start is I don't want to create dependency in people. And I don't think we need to create dependency in people. And so I'm very rigorous though in checking that person is ready to do the work. And if they're not, then they get turned away no matter how much money they offer. And the crucial thing here is that they're doing a lot of the work, and you'll know this as a coach, as a therapist, you're taking them, you're the guide, but they have to do the work and they have to be ready to get vulnerable to do that work. And not everyone's ready to do that straight away. But when they come to me one-on-one, it's mostly online. I do some in-person stuff, but I kind of don't need to a lot of the time. If I have someone with really, really deep trauma in the UK that I can get to, I may go and do an in-person session just because of the nature of the trauma. I feel like I want to be there in person.
Mhm.
But I've worked with people in Australia, Hawaii, the US, Canada, Kenya, all online, all with trauma and other issues. But I can't give you a definitive answer of what the entire journey would look like. It's a bit different for each person. But I will always look at, first of all, their sleep patterns, because you fix sleep and you fix 80% of problems often. But also, what's been going on. So there's signs of depression, if they exhibit them in any way, just so we can understand what's going on there. Any past trauma, panic attacks, fears, and try to understand really what it is that they think the problem is. And I say it's really important what they think the problem is, because again, this, the problem is never the problem. But sometimes the person doesn't understand that straight away, or sometimes they do and they don't want to tell you. And I had a lady, for example, who came to me with extreme insomnia. She'd not been sleeping for like 60 years. It was that bad. But she came up to me and she went, I think it's the menopause. And I was kind of like, but you've had this for a pretty long time. And after 3 sessions, we basically, it came out that she was abused as a child in her bedroom. So that was why she couldn't sleep, because it had never been a safe space. And even just admitting that allowed her to move forward. So, but she, again, that wasn't she didn't want to admit that was a problem. And so there is this piece of understanding what the problem truly is. And for some people that comes quickly, some that takes more time. I had a client who was an Afghan refugee actually, with us, and I have affinity to Afghanistan, having served there, so I do understand some of the trauma that he's experienced. And he had a really bad relationship breakup, and it just destroyed. He'd been with this lovely lady for 5 years. He just thought, what was the point in life? But then we kind of explored the fact that part of the issue was that he wasn't there when his father died, because his father had sent him away from Afghanistan to escape the war. He couldn't get back. His father then died. And there was this feeling of like abandonment, of not being good enough. And it all just came out after this relationship breakup. And so it's really important to create the space that the person can discover for themselves what it is that's really blocking them, and just be be that supportive, but gently pushing therapist or coach to help them find it.
And often, don't you find that just acknowledging what the problem is like half the solution?
Oh yeah, yeah, and validating that it's okay that that is the problem. You
Yeah.
know, and when we talk about trauma as well, people think that they have to be these big traumatic events, but a trauma could be the memory of you as a child and your parents not coming to your school play, and that creates feelings of worthlessness, and you don't even realize it. And people looking on might say, well, that's not really that traumatic, but for that child in that moment, it absolutely is. Then of course, as you turn into adulthood, that memory, that trauma is layered with other stuff, and it grows and grows, and it takes them a whole new life. And you talk
And
about this sort of dark going.
every time you remember something, you remember it differently. So you
Yes.
actually create a different memory. And unless you have somebody that can guide you towards remembering it in a way that empowers you, your brain will automatically make it even worse the next time.
Right. Absolutely. Then that's also, again, where it's really great, the principles of neuroscience and using things like neurolinguistic programming or clinical hypnotherapy. We can rewire those memories so that they no longer affect you. We can, and so you tell yourself a new narrative, and the narrative is no longer that from the eyes of a 7-year-old child, but from a 40-year-old adult who understands that their parents got stuck in traffic and didn't make it, and it was never about their own worth. It was about the fact that that day the traffic was terrible, and being okay to go. But it was also okay as a child to feel abandoned, because that's a big deal. So, but with combining all these modalities, people don't have to sit with the traumatic memories. We can help them to write a new story, and that they can be the hero of every memory.
And even the people that do have really bad trauma in their lives, eh, you can you can embrace the bad things in a way that still empowers you. Like the woman who was abused when she was a child. Yeah, that was a horrible thing. And there's a lot of shame around stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that, especially if it was when you were a child and you didn't know how to share what was happening or nobody believed you. That happened a lot. Um,
Mm.
that it doesn't have to define you. And
Yeah.
often if you're getting into adulthood and you haven't dealt with the trauma of something that bad that really did happen to you, and we're allowed to express it and express your anger over what happened to you, because oftentimes people just hide it, they're ashamed
Yeah.
of it, and they're like, I can't tell anybody about this because it was obviously my fault. I did something that caused this to happen, which is, you know, you're a little kid. No, it's the adult's
Exactly.
problem. Um, and they have their own problems, that led them to that situation. But if you have the tools to be able, and the safe space to be able to say, okay, this is what it was. How can I, how can I embrace it and let it enhance my life instead of just ruling everything that I do and trying to keep a lid on it.
Yeah. And that's a really important thing that you brought up there, because there's a difference. You can be a victim of something, but using that language of being a victim throughout your whole life can hold you back. Whereas if you can go, no, I survived being a victim. In some situations that's really appropriate. It's finding how you empower yourself from the negatives and the lessons to learn in these things. And sometimes the lesson is, I can't control everything that happens to me, and that's okay, but I can control me. And I choose to go out in the world. I choose to write a book. I choose to become a coach. I choose to heal. And I had a really good conversation with my clients the other day about forgiveness. So another person who'd been abused by their grandfather, and she was able to find forgiveness of him, but it wasn't for him, it was for her.
Right.
And it was all about what she needed. And she, as an adult, understood that actually he was also a victim of abuse. And so he'd perpetuated the cycle of all he knew, hurt people, hurt people.
Right.
But she could have continued on a path in a number of directions. So she could have gone down a very dark path, harming herself. She could have gone down a dark path, harming other people. But she chose to find that forgiveness. And now she has written a book. She is still working through some things, but she has, in a very short space of time, really found her light and found the lessons that she can learn from that experience.
Exactly. And that all comes from having the tools in your toolbox to be able to move forward and past things that are holding you back.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of what you do.
Thank you. And you as well. So, and other people, but I think, yeah, I think the main thing really is to remember that not everything works for everybody, but there are so many things out there that whether it's me, whether it's you, whether it's somebody else, there is always someone who can help you on that pathway to the light, and you don't have to do it alone, and you don't have to sit there and suffer.
For sure. For sure. I know you have a PDF, I suspect, the 4 simple steps to stop negative thoughts. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So this is a really simple exercise. It's based on neurolinguistic fundamentals, but essentially if you ever listen to how you talk to yourself, sometimes we talk to ourselves in a way that we wouldn't talk to our friends. We can be so negative, so critical, so harsh. So this is just a really simple 4-step exercise to stop those negative behaviors, those negative thoughts. And it starts with understanding what it is that you're saying to yourself. I'm not good enough. I did everything wrong. And it asks you to really try and find the opposite of that. So we often generalize. The brain loves to generalize, distort and delete. And we like to generalize and go, I did everything wrong, and forget that actually we did one thing wrong that day, but 20 million other things really were right. So it's all about challenging those assumptions. Mm-hmm. And then once you have flipped them to the positive, just reinforcing it each day until, a habit becomes a habit where you no longer think about it. Mm-hmm. And so if you keep this practice going, at some point you'll realize that you no longer think those thoughts. And then you're thinking in a far more positive and kind and self-loving way.
And it's a choice. So people can find that on your website, and you want to tell them your website? Yeah,
thank you. My website is philippabagley.com. I'll spell it because I know my name's a bit weird for some people. philippabagley.com.
Perfect. And we will put that in the show notes below. This has been a very fascinating conversation, Philippa, and I really have enjoyed it. What's the one thing you hope the audience takes away from our conversation today?
I think the one thing is that you don't have to sit in pain, and you don't have to go through a long time to change. That's 2 things, I know, sorry. But yes, you don't.
It's all one.
Yeah, you can change. You just have to want to. And there's so many tools out there to help you.
And as soon as you want to, contact Philippa. Thanks for joining me. Thank you for joining us for the U World Order Showcase podcast. Remember, if you would like to be featured on this podcast as a life, health, or transformational coach, please visit www.jointheuworldorder.com. We look forward to talking to you next time as we present another life, health, or transformational coach being the change they seek in the world.